Hi, everybody. I'm Lynne McTaggart, and I am so excited to tell you about our Get Well show, which is going to be held at Olympia, February 21st to 23rd. It is the first show of its kind to offer actual therapists in so many areas, doctors, healers, therapists of all varieties, to help you with any kind of chronic condition you have. And we're going to feature 41 different therapists doing all kinds of things. And one of our stars is Dr. Damien Downing, who I have here. Now, Dr. Downing is probably the preeminent British specialist in ecological medicine. He's the former editor of the Journal of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine. He's the president of the British Society for Ecological Medicine. And he is really, as I say, a real star in this field, which is the British equivalent to functional medicine. So he is here today with me to talk about, give you a little glimpse of what he's going to talk about, which has to do with an amazing discovery and use he's made of phospholipids. So hi, Dr. Downing. Lovely
Hi
to
there,
see
Lynn.
you.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit about this. This has become a real interest of yours.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's become, like the missing link, the bit that we were waiting for all this time. Phospholipids, let's assume, phospholipids are what your cells are made of, right? If we cut you right down to Olympic athlete physique, so you've got no storage fat at all, you're still going to be about 20% fat and oil by weight. And that's pretty much it all in the membranes of your cells, the outer wall of your cell and all the internal structures in it, okay? And those are lined up in these membranes and like a forest of pine trees or whatever, they're all parallel molecules. And they need to be in exactly the right composition in order for your cells to work. They used to call it solid state signaling, the messages that go from one side of the cell, from outside the cell membrane to inside, right? But it's not really solid. It's a fine balance between solid and fluid. And when you think about it, that's life. That's what life is the difference between outside the cell and inside the cell, isn't it? So the thing that has become more and more important these days is the pollution that we're all exposed to, the heavy metals, you remember lead in petrol, and all the other metals that are everywhere in our lives these days, the pesticides, the petrochemicals, so on and so forth, and even the electromagnetic pollution, because that affects the cell membranes and how they function, and the channels through the membrane. And 90-something percent of these toxins that we're exposed to, they're fat soluble. So when a database thing says, oh, this is cleared from the system in 72 hours or something like that, sure, it's out of the blood in that time, but it ends up in what we call the fatty compartment of the body, or the lipid compartment. Now, part of that is the storage fat, so it's inside fat cells, but part of it also is in the cell membranes. That's really not a good place to store your toxins.
So what effect does it have on the body?
Well, endless effects, really. I mean, it affects in so many ways. Firstly, it disrupts the functioning of the cell membranes like that, and mean that, cells overreact or don't react when they need to. Secondly, it just gets in the way of cell functioning, clogs up the biochemical pathways. Thirdly, it can have an effect on the DNA. It can actually interfere with your genes being switched on and making the proteins that you need for all your functions.
So phospholipids, so they're part of your cells, but you've also been using and you've been intrigued by the use of this to detox. Can you
Yeah,
tell us a
exactly.
little bit about this?
Yeah, because you won't get access into the fatty, oily parts of the body, including the membrane, just using water-soluble stuff, because effectively the body is divided into lipid compartment and aqueous compartment. And if all your drugs and your chemicals and stuff are in the aqueous compartment, they do nothing to the lipid compartment. So using things like phosphatidylcholine, which is basically it's fats and oils in the form in which they need to be incorporated into the membranes, you can get access in not just into the membrane, but right through the membrane and into the cell. So using these, you can get stuff out of the cell into the system, and because the body is set up for this or perfectly well, if you give it the chance, you can then get excretion through the liver, the bile, where it's all supposed to go, out into the out of the body.
And this is done by taking it by mouth or intravenously, or how?
There's three ways you can do it. You can do it by mouth, which is practical for people to do themselves. You can do it by, but which is relatively slow and so forth. You can do it with intravenous treatments, which is fast and effective, but it's really quite expensive. Or with medical supervision, you can do it with a small enema type thing.
So what's the outcome of this? It's a major detox system, is it?
Well, it is. You're doing several things when you do this. Number one, yes, you are detoxing. Sometimes there's a threshold. You have to push relatively hard in order to get the detox process working. So for instance, if we're treating really sick patients, we'd often give them a run of 3 or 4 intravenous treatments to begin with, and after the third or fourth, they start getting some cramping and churning the abdomen, and then they have an almighty clear out of the bowel, and then we say, right, the liver bile excretion system is up and running again. So now we can use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So who should come listen to your talk, and what are they going to take away?
Well, I think anybody who's alive in the 21st century, really. But certainly anybody who has symptoms. The other things, by the way, that we do, what you can achieve with the treatment are it has an inflammatory effect. Even if it's not detoxing something, it does have a damping down effect. Obviously, with all of this stuff, prevention would have been better than cure. Mm-hmm. And keeping healthy with the right sort of oils and so forth is, an essential part of staying alive and living a long, healthy life. Mm-hmm. But if it's got to the stage that you are sick and you're burdened with toxins and so forth, then we want to do the detox. We want to settle down the inflammation if at all possible. Mm-hmm. And we want to remodel the cell membranes. And of course, this is particularly important with the nervous system because of the shape of a nerve cell. You've got a cell here with a long, long axon, mm-hmm. which means that it's all surface. The surface to volume ratio is very high. Mm. Mm. And therefore, nerve cells are particularly vulnerable to, these nutritional and toxic problems.
So this is the kind of information that people with pretty much any chronic condition can discover and find out whether or not detox of this kind of nature will be useful for them.
Yes, yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, if this is you and you're listening, Dr. Downing will be there. Dr. Damien Downing will be at our show speaking, and I really urge you to listen to him because what he has to say is really revolutionary. So have a look at our website, getwell.solutions. Find out about our speaker schedule and when Dr. Downing is going to be speaking. And don't forget, buy yourself a ticket because they're going really quickly. You can avoid the queues, get a certain discount, and get to see all of these fantastic therapies. So thank you so much, Dr. Downing, for sharing this with us.
My pleasure.